Okay, good afternoon everyone, welcome. I don't normally, but I thought about it the other day. I think I should ask everybody to introduce themselves before we start the meeting, if that's okay. If we can start with you, Paul.
Hello there, yeah, Paul Gill. I'm Shropshire Councillor for the Hotnet Division.
Peggy.
Kim Mullock, and a substituting for
Steve Davenport.
Sorry, I didn't know his name.
Yeah.
Jeff Elner, the member for
Dan.
Dan Morris representing Burnham.
Julian.
Julian Dean, Port Hill.
Yeah. Okay.
Kate Halliday, Bellevue, substituting for Councillor Pam Mosley.
Thank you, Rob.
Rob Wilson from Copperthorne, substituting for David Asma.
Okay, Daniel, if you'd like to say who you are.
thank you, Chair. Daniel, overview the scrutiny officer.
Okay, and Sarah, would you like to say who you are?
Sarah Townsend, committee officer and clerk.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Councillor Joyce Barrow. I'm chairman of this committee. So
Chair, may I note that I'm Andy Boddington from Ludlow North, joining remotely.
Apologies, yes. Thank you, Andy. Okay, if we can start the meeting. Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Place Overview Committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting using the link on the agenda. So I'll start by giving apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Steve Davenport and Councillor Peggy Mullock. Sorry, Peggy.
On screen, she's trying to catch your attention.
Oh, sorry, Julia. Have we missed it, Julia?
I am not a member of the committee. I've just come to ask a question, but I am Councillor Julia Buckley from Bridge North, West and Tassley. Thank you.
Yeah, I would have let her introduce herself when she asked the question. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Pam Mosley is being substituted by Councillor Kate Halliday. Councillor David Asma is being substituted by Councillor Rob Wilson. Councillor Steve Charmley has given his apologies, and he's portfolio holder, physical infrastructure, highways and built housing. We've also had apologies very late in the day from Paul Wynne, who unfortunately there is a family issue, so he's not here today. We'll now move on to item 2. Has anybody any disclosable pecuniary interests? We have none. Item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Unfortunately, we do not have those minutes, and I apologise to everyone, but due to the pressures on democratic services, it was impossible to actually get them in time for the meeting, but they will be going out shortly. Item 4, public question time. We do have one question, public question. It's from Graham Booth, who's clerk to Sutton Parish Council. And he asks, and this question is going to be answered by Tracy Dark, and welcome to the meeting, Tracy.
Thank you.
Farmsteads be defined as settlements in their own right in the context of local rural housing needs. If you'd like to respond, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. So Shropshire Council, through the current and emerging local plan review, has identified a robust and extensive hierarchy of recognisable named settlements and applied this to the policy preparation, including through the delivery of local needs affordable housing provision. This does not recognise farmsteads as distinct settlements in their own right, and therefore it would not be appropriate for the council to use such a geography to assess local rural housing needs. The council's countryside policy, both in the current and emerging local plans, does specifically recognise the importance of permitting essential rural workers' dwellings in appropriate circumstances, including where these would be linked to an activity relating to the management of the land for agriculture, forestry or another land-based rural business where certain criteria has been met. It is felt this approach recognises the intrinsic rural character of Shropshire, whilst also ensuring that housing for local needs is primarily delivered in named settlements served by a range of services and facilities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I should say Tracy Dark is the Assistant Director, Economy and Place.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will now move on to member questions, which is 5. We have 2 questions. The first one is from Councillor Rob Wilson. If you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you. I'd like to ask what representations have been made by Cabinet members or Shropshire Council officers to the Department for Transport, the Member of Parliament for Shrewsbury and Atcham, or government ministers in support of Shrewsbury's bid for Mini Holland funding since the submission of the expression of interest on the 9th of August.
Would you like to respond, Tracy?
Thank you. The expression of interest was submitted by Mark Barrow, who is the Executive Director of Place, with letters of support from the leader, Councillor Leslie Picton, Councillor Cecilia Motley, Shrewsbury Town Council and local Shrewsbury Town Councillors on behalf of Shrewsbury Town Council and Shrewsbury Bid. If the expression of interest is successful, a full bid and business case will be developed. It is not normal practice for either officer or members to lobby for an expression of interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a second member question, which is from Councillor Julia Buckley. If you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions. So the first one is that at last week's Performance Management Committee, members received a report on quarterly KPI progress. And despite 3 place-related KPIs showing an increase in carbon output, and these were a drop in recycling rates, an increase in urban roads requiring repair, an increase in rural roads requiring repair. So despite those, it was stated that the report had no environmental implications. They also do not yet appear in the Shropshire Climate Change Report. So it's worrying that these environmental implications for increased carbon by place-related work do not appear to be assessed by officers or reported to members. One implication is that our authority is nominated for a National Highways Award on environmental sustainability due to the carbon reduction of one road repair material used this year, but there is no consideration of a concurrent decision to double the travel distances of heavy vehicles responding to road repairs and winter gritting in the rural east of the county. So could this jeopardise our entry into the awards?
If you'd like to respond, please, Tracy.
Thank you. No, it shouldn't jeopardise our entry into the award. The council and its partners have been shortlisted for its innovative £1 million programme of carbon neutral maintenance, which is the first of its kind in the country. The award considers purely that scheme and no other elements of service activity.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask your second question now, Julia.
So in April 21, the annual progress report on the Kia contract to this Place Committee, there was no mention of Kia's proposal to close 2 rural highways depots. In section 6 of that report on asset condition, none of the depots received a mention, and in section 4.1 it stated there were no financial implications. Yet the Highway Strategic Operational Board had already decided in December 2020 to close the 2 rural highways depots without any reporting to members for their approval. It seems highly irregular that this vital information was omitted from that annual report to scrutiny members on this committee. Without scrutiny of contractors delivering highways activity, it prevents member oversight and accountability. Does this breach the legal terms of the Kia contract and the governance process for Shropshire Council?
If you'd like to respond. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it doesn't. As has been explained to all Bridge North members, the decision to temporarily relocate services was a necessity to ensure continuing service provision over the winter. Not to do so would have put at risk the council's ability to deliver full services in those areas, particularly gritting over winter. There are no contractual implications to this decision. I would remind that this is not a permanent decision, and the service will develop a paper to provide a business case for a formal decision on whether to invest in Bridge North and/or Hodnett depots to allow services to be delivered from those depots in the future, or to close the depots permanently, depending on what provides the greatest value to the council and the communities they serve, to ensure that there is a full visibility of the decision on the future of those depots. Thank you.
Thank you very
So
much.
if I could just ask the supplementary, the question is why a decision was made in December 2020 to close the depots that was already made by the board, why that was not reported to members of this committee whose job is to provide oversight. Why was it omitted from the report to these members who are asking what is happening in that contract?
Thank you. Would you like to answer that, Tracy? And there's no repetition there, Julia. Thank you.
Yes, I think yes. I mean, clearly, the it's about the council. As I said, council's ability to deliver services. So there was a pressing need to ensure that the services continue to be delivered, and they're vital services as well to our communities. But clearly there's a reporting mechanism, and I can take that back to the assistant director and ask him to explain in writing why that didn't happen.
I think it's important, isn't it? Because the purpose of this committee is to receive that annual report, and to have deliberately omitted that is quite serious. The decision had already been made in December.
Would you please stop? You should go through the chair with your questions, and you had a supplementary. So I'd be very grateful if you please follow the normal way of working. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item 6, which is post-COVID-19 economic renewal. And before we do, I'd just like to remind members what the recommendation is on this, that members note and endorse the report and provide feedback as appropriate, and that members advise on any additional areas that may need as part of the post-COVID economic renewal, in particular the workshops planned for the economic development strategy refresh. Thank you. If you'd like to present the report, please, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, there's quite a lot of information I've put before you, and it's really good to have the opportunity actually to share some of the work that has been happening within my economic development area and responsibilities, but also in terms of the wider economic benefits and work that's been happening through COVID pandemic, because I think really it's about how we've supported businesses and our communities to be able to survive through those difficult times and to come out of the other side of COVID pandemic with businesses that are really thriving. So I would first say that, and I think there was mention earlier about the town centre and how busy it is. And I think as we go up, the high street in Shrewsbury and our other towns, we see that they're very vibrant and busy. And that's reflected in some of the footfall we're seeing, where our footfall is back to pre-COVID pandemic levels, and that is really bucking the trend of other places. So I think it's a positive note to start on, that we are seeing real investment into our towns and our area in a wider sense. I think as we sort of see people wanting to live and work more in Shropshire, and we're seeing a real increase in people coming to live in the area, and they're finding that our beautiful environment that we have in Shropshire is really coming to fruition through the COVID pandemic, as people decide that actually we can live and we can work in the place as well. So we're seeing a real shift of people and house prices increasing, and that's about economic prosperity as well. That really plays into the importance of how we support our industry. There has been some areas that have been particularly hit hard, and interestingly in South Shropshire, as we see around Ludlow, areas like that, they've been hardest hit for unemployment during COVID, but have been seen to be recovering the fastest. So again, a really positive message around how we're seeing our area come out of that, out of COVID pandemic, and really see that recovery. One of the significant things that we had during COVID pandemic was the development of the Economic Task Force, and this was to do work with our partners, because of course as a council we can't fix everything on our own, and we need to work with our strong partners, and this is the business boards, the BID, lots of the LEP, lots of organisations, and we came together and we have regularly monthly meetings to talk about how we can support each other to help our businesses and our communities. And quite significant work has helped businesses to reshape and reinvent themselves during these times, and certainly we can see some of that work through one of the appendices that I've included, which is some of the stuff that's come through the Growth Hub and the LEP, and we can see in that the numbers of businesses that have been supported, regular weekly catch-ups with businesses to say we're here, we're available to support you, and actually here's a lot of things we can do to support your business, like training and development, you know, how to manage your finances in these difficult times and help to keep you supported as we see it difficult to recruit people, you know, bringing young people into the fold and being able to upskill people as well through COVID pandemic. So interesting work that's happened, I would say, through our economic task force. Another area that's been really important as we look at business support has been about the grant funding. So of course the grant funding has come down from government. Around £160 million has been distributed across Shropshire during the period, and we're still passing out money as well to businesses. What we've decided to do is to hold back a small amount of that money, so £2.7 million, to be able to use that so that we can actually provide wider benefits. So rather than just giving lumps of money to businesses, as we saw in the sort of, you know, the early stages of the government grant funding, and that's right and proper to keep those businesses alive and surviving. But we've also decided as a council to take some of that money and develop schemes with businesses that gives those wider benefits. So we're seeing, for example, schemes like, you know, for people over 50, helping to reskill them. So the silverpreneurs, for example, and that has really taken off. So again, a fantastic example of how we're supporting people and thinking about new businesses that they want to develop and grow. So again, opportunities during COVID pandemic as well, as we are an area that has one of our strengths is with our SMEs, but also new businesses, people wanting to, you know, that have lost their jobs, that thought, actually, here's an opportunity of me to start my new business that I've always wanted to do. And we are seeing quite a surge in that in the area. So that's exciting. And we are looking quite closely at how we are upskilling our young people. So how we support, you know, through the colleges and university, how we can help young people get into jobs, and also how we can support those that are in our more sort of deprived communities around. And I mean deprived in the sense of difficult to get to a place of work. You know, if you're a young person in the more rural area, how do we help you access jobs? You know, if you don't have the money to, you know, pay for your bus fare, how do you get into the place of work? So we're looking at all opportunities through that as well. One of the other areas of work we're doing is around our economic development strategy. So our strategy is coming to its end in 2021, and we're looking at the refresh of that. And that's about to embark on a number of workshops, which, you know, there will be a lot of people, stakeholders, members and our community invited to those workshops. And there will be particular themes that we set out, and that will start to shape our strategy for the coming years. So again, a very important piece of work. We had a local government association review as well of the work we're doing, and with the task force and the economic development strategy refresh, it was seen that we are really the view, the LGA's view was that our future activity is really helping our economy to recover. So certainly that external validation is saying that we're absolutely on the right lines. The council is also taking the lead on major regeneration projects as well. So again, it's great to see schemes and projects such as the Big Town Plan and Riverside in our town centre, Oswestry, as we see the development underway now at Mile End, the Northwest Relief Road, you know, major investment projects, and it gives others the confidence to invest in our area as well. We've been progressing the Levelling Up Fund. We've put in 3 bids, so we can put in 3 bids up to £20 million in the different constituencies. So as I say, 3, one for Oswestry, one for Shrewsbury and one for Craven Arms. And again, to really help to regenerate those areas. Another area of work which members will be really clear on is the local plan. And again, that is about how we encourage people to invest in our area, and that is about economic growth. And of course, the plan has now been submitted and it's trundling its way through the process to the examination in public, which we should be hopefully having later this year. The other area of work is working with our health partners. So as part of the integrated care system, we've done a report recently which has looked at how our health and well-being and our economic development work that we're doing, how that's linked together, which is really important. So, you know, the health and well-being around if somebody has a job, you know, how that helps their mental health, for example, and then that leads to, you know, and being able to afford a home and all the things that we see that's important in our lives. So how can we pull that out and see what the benefits are to people's health and well-being around all the work we're doing in economic development, economic growth and investment. So just to conclude, and as members can see, there's a lot of appendices and annexes to the report as well with more information. I'd like to think that we're really pushing forward in terms of some exciting big projects in the area, and also supporting that ever-changing economic environment that we're seeing during COVID pandemic, and also as we move forward so that people are attracted to Shropshire. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any? Jack.
I live in Market Town, and I don't see much happening in Market Town to support them with Regeneration. There was money to bring people back to the high streets, but then we were told that had to be spent on cleaning and weeding and painting of furniture and so on, which are easy things to do. We've got a company, 150 employees that is closing. We've got small businesses that have nowhere to go because there's no units and so on. So I'd like some economic regeneration in market towns, because after all, that's what we're there for, to provide employment. And I can't see why you've chosen, how do we justify Craven Arms?
Would you like to respond to that, Tracy?
Yes, sure. So we looked at, it had to be within each of the three constituents. Craven Arms was identified because it's within our local plan, so our previous local plan and this iteration of the local plan, where there were sites allocated that are just not able to come forward because the value of contributions out of the development sites does not justify the big kit items that are needed to improve the highway infrastructure. So even though we've got sites allocated, and even though it was a place that wants to see growth and support growth rather than in our more rural areas in that part of the district, we felt that that was a great opportunity to put forward for a LUF bid. So that the LUF bid is around infrastructure improvements. So it's our only opportunity to almost be able to bring those sites forward. If we're taking our local plan forward, any allocations have to be developable and deliverable to be in the local plan. So we have to demonstrate how we're going to be able to deliver those sites. They were in the previous iteration of the local plan and they haven't come forward because of that issue. So that's why Craven Arms was focused on. It's an area that's really up for growth and we want to support that through the LUF bid. We are really focusing though on our other towns as well, and whilst we've looked at Shrewsbury and Oswestry, there's a lot of work going on in Bridge North now as well through the area assessments, and we will incrementally look through our towns. But we've also got our place plans as well, so there's a lot of work that goes on through the place plans. I know they were paused in COVID pandemic for a year, but we're now looking at refreshing the place plans, and there's opportunities through those to identify schemes.
Thank you. Yeah, now I have Julian.
Thanks. I've got quite a few bits and pieces, so I'll try and make it as clear as possible. I mean, the first bit is just with regards to the Appendix C in terms of looking at the plan of action for developing a new strategy. What it doesn't have is a review of the last one. And I accept that that would be tricky because of the last year and a half, but nevertheless, we had 3 years of the last one, and we don't seem to have considered, whether it was effective or not. And I suppose that's prompted by the thought that, that the drivers for growth that are being identified in terms of house building and the high streets, we know from the council meeting where we discussed the local plan that whilst people, ended up voting for it, there was a lot of unhappiness. And I think the idea that is that the principal driver for growth should simply be house building doesn't really hold water. And then that takes me on to some of the things that perhaps we should be doing. So the last 3 days, there's been a really interesting retrofit conference for Shropshire, out of which it was quite clear that there's a desperate need to develop the firms. There's a desperate need to get the right training into the colleges, that currently people are being still trained in old construction techniques, and we're not yet getting the right courses there. And that isn't featuring, you know, the word retrofit hasn't featured in any of these papers as far as I can tell. And then the next thread of that, if you like, is the whole sort of community wealth building thing. So I did some digging into our social value work, and there was a paper some time ago done with locality about this, and I sort of emailed to see if anything was happening, and it seemed to have got a bit stuck. But it's quite interesting in a couple of your papers, in fact in the health one, it talks about how the health economy and how the players in the health economy actually could potentially have a huge role, because they procure potentially locally. You know, so there's a whole story of what people call community wealth building, in terms of, you know, those big players, those anchor institutions in the area, talking to them about how we develop the jobs that people who are already here need, and skilling people who are already here in those areas. And I'm just not getting the sense that that's sitting centrally to all this. So I just want some reassurance that some of that social value, building community wealth, and also the retrofit story is going to be considered really carefully as we try and develop a new economic strategy. Thanks.
Do you have any other questions, or is that it?
I think that's for you.
Okay, then. Would you like to respond, Tracy?
Thank you. I mean, I think they're really, really good points, really, really good questions. In terms of the review of the strategy, and as we said in the report, you know, we welcome views and we welcome comments around how we can sort of, you know, do that, improve that. We're just about to embark on the workshops, and we're just about to embark on that work. So I think it's a really valid point. You know, let's look at it. And of course, you know, half of the time period of the last document, 17 to 21, is COVID pandemic. So, you know, all very different, but nonetheless, there's always lessons to be learned, isn't there? Whatever, you know, I mean, that was our economy at that time, so we have to sort of learn from that. So we'll absolutely take that back and look at, you know, including that as part of the review. As far as the drivers for growth, you know, of course, house building is important, but it isn't just about house building. It's about, you know, our sort of commercial activity. It's all the other activities, you know, building schools and, you know, all the other things that we do that make us a thriving economy and improve our area for our, you know, our residents. As far as retrofit firms are concerned, that sort of feeds into, you know, development techniques, and, you know, how do we support those businesses coming into Shropshire, and how do we make, and I think it was mentioned earlier, sites available for them as well, you know, so having a pipeline of supply of sites coming through, that when businesses say, you know, we need, you know, 20 acres to develop this business, then we say, right, okay, here's where we can direct you to, and make sure we're, you know, absolutely, you know, we've got sites that are oven ready as well. So really important point, and that's why it's ever more important to get the local plan through the process, because that will bring forward that pipeline of sites. As far as the social value issue is concerned, and so linking it into the ICS work, absolutely, again, you know, the players in the health economy are important. We're just about to start that work. In fact, you know, speaking very honestly about it, the health board that has developed has just sort of said to us, so what are you doing over here, you know, in economy, not just Shropshire, but Telford as well. And we've been working together with Telford to produce a report, which I've attached as an appendix as well, so that you can see the sorts of things we're already doing. But we have played that back to the health board and said, so what's the problem we're trying to fix? You know, is it obesity? Is it smoking and pregnancy? Was it underage pregnancy? What's the issue we're trying to fix? Help us as well to, you know, and work with us, and we can bring that together and skill people up as well through that work. So it's really on, you know, the very early stages, and it is, they do talk, you know, public health talk about a 10-year plan. You know, it is a longer term thing, but, you know, as I say, we're just right at the beginning of that work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Dan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your report, Tracy. I've got 4 questions, if I may. Firstly, a an observation that the grant distribution that happened over COVID, I think generally was very well received and very well done by the council. I think, there were lots of businesses, particularly in my area, who were very, very appreciative of how it was done. I mean, there were some teething issues when it went through, but the council did a very good job, and I think that point needs making. Is there a view on fraudulent activity and how much of that money has been fraudulently claimed, or and how are we chasing any of that money back that has it been, if it has been fraudulently claimed for? I'd like you to comment on how much more or less important the Northwest Relief Road is in terms of the economic development of our county as a result of COVID. We're a rural county, pretty much. We have a big visitor economy. We have a big agribusiness economy. We have Europe's, if not the biggest food group in Europe, or one of the biggest food groups in Europe, ABP. Is there a view on how companies like that are maintaining their business in terms of labour supply? Has there muted problems with Brexit about people going away and not coming back? Is there a view from these big companies? They're really important to our economy, and perhaps I would have liked to have seen a bit more of a sectoral analysis of which sectors have done better and which have done worse in Shropshire's economy, particularly around those two areas, which are sort of quite close to my heart. So I think I've said enough. So I look forward to your response. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you on the comments on the grant distribution. I think, it's fair to say that my economic development team were working flat out with lots of other people across the council to make sure that grants got out as quickly as possible. And I think we were probably pretty, up there in terms of councils across the piece as to pushing out the grant money as quickly as possible. I think it's a fair point around fraudulent activity, and it is sort of next steps really as we're starting to sort of close down the grants, and it's something I'll take back to finance really around how we sort of verify some of that work. I think at the time, it was best endeavours. We have to sort of take ourselves back to what it was like, a year or more ago, and how difficult it was to, but there was quite strong verification that went through the businesses had to go through the process quite rigorously to be able to have the grant funding. And whilst I wasn't here last year, I experienced it in my previous authority, but of course there has to be a process around and whether that's the sampling of whether the businesses that receive the grants whether that was the right thing. So I'll take that back as a response. In terms of the importance of the Northwest Relief Road, of course as an officer I would say it's really important. It features in our local plan and it's all about our economic growth, and it's about getting around our town quicker, all the benefits. But I certainly wouldn't want to sort of walk into sort of political sort of views around that. But as far as officers are concerned, it's a really important thing post-COVID pandemic to attract growth. It shows that we're up for growth and that the council is prepared to invest as well its time and its money into such a big project. As far as this sort of agri-tech businesses are concerned and how are those companies being supported, we've got quite a lot of work streams really, which is looking around Brexit. So for example, we're doing some work with the University of Chester to sort of look at that as well, so it's a short piece of work to understand how are businesses surviving through the Brexit issue, how are they accessing people to be able to work, and the whole sort of transportation issues are quite challenging to get people, lorry drivers, the cost of those. So lots and lots of issues around Brexit that we think that probably not quite out there as prominent as we'd like to think they were. So we're sort of digging deep and trying to get a real understanding around what's happening in Shropshire and the sort of impacts it's having. We've had some discussions and traces of concerns by some of the companies, particularly around Craven Arms, and we're looking at how we can support those businesses. Again, the Growth Hub is doing talks and support around Brexit as well, and we're also linking that across to some of our other partners as well. West Midlands Combined Authority, they're doing a lot of work around Brexit as well. So we've got quite a lot of things on our radar to look at. And then sorry, I'm just looking at my list. Oh, and in terms of sectoral analysis, we've got quite a lot of information around which which sectors are thriving, which of those are struggling. I mean, obviously we're seeing a lot around digital at the moment, and again it plays into the agri-tech stuff as well. How can we support those businesses developing 5G? Lots of ways and opportunities of bringing those sectors forward, and also working closely with the colleges. And I think touched on around training, some of the courses that the colleges are putting on, are they right for now? And whilst we're having those conversations, sometimes it's quite a difficult tanker to turn, and isn't an overnight fix. But we are working with the colleges around, if we've got, and I use the digital sort of one as an example. We've got companies that work in Shropshire that just cannot get people to work for them, and yet there's great opportunities around digital. So how do we, and we're having conversations with the colleges, and yet they haven't got the courses. We've got companies that could actually put a whole cohort of people into the college and develop just for their own business. So what opportunities are there with colleges? And we're exploring all that as well. Hope that's helpful, Chair.
Sorry, just a question then, Tracy. So more specifically, there are businesses like ABP, Euro Quality Foods in that are massively important to our farming.
Yeah.
Our farmers, they supply them with animals to go into the food chain, and it's all over the news at the moment about not having enough staff to work in this environment. And I just wondered, ABP, for example, would be one of the biggest contributors to the business rate purse within Shropshire Council. I would say, they're a big company certainly anyway. So, is it worth? And I don't know whether this is an appropriate question for now. It might be for Daniel and the chair. But do we want to get companies like this in to sort of understand and question them a little bit more about, are they suffering? Are they not? The pandemic recovery, food business in retail has gone through the roof. There's more demand gone through supermarkets, and these people can't get staff to come in and work. A lot of Polish people work in these sort of areas, and and they're just not available. I know because I'm in the industry. So, are there? Have these businesses been in touch with us, and are they? I'd just like to get a bit more of an understanding about how much Shropshire knows about that.
If I can jump in there, Dan, before you answer, Tracy, I think that would be a good piece of work that we could do as a committee and see how the council is working with these businesses. I think the report is fine, but it's very surface level, isn't it? It's skimming the surface of everything that's going on. So I would suggest that we actually put it on our work programme, invite people from these companies to come along, tell us what their issues and problems are, and council officers to tell us what is happening and what we are doing to try and resolve those issues, if that's okay. We'll put that on the work programme at the end, so we'll come against that. If you'd like to respond, Tracy.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it would be an interesting piece of work. Actually, we've got pre-COVID pandemic, my team, and again, sorry, I've only been here this year, but as far as I understand it, we have key accounts. So we have the team manage our key accounts, and they had focused very much on the top 250 companies in the area. And those were the companies that employed over 50 people. So you could sort of argue, well, are they our biggest businesses really? Are they our biggest business rates businesses? And I've had lots of conversations, but of course my economic development team has been absolutely 100% working on COVID grants. So they're only just coming back into doing some of their normal work now. And further conversations I've had with Matt Potts, who heads that team, is, should we be focusing on 250 businesses that we have probably touch points on, odd phone calls with them every now and again, and shouldn't we, and the whole list around business rates, and I've had them to chase up the list of business rate, who are our top 50 business rate payers. And it's been interesting actually just doing that exercise, because it's work that I've done elsewhere, and your point around, well, which are the biggest businesses, who are paying the biggest business rates, and they are important to Shropshire, of course, and Shropshire Council. When you look at that list, interestingly, there are quite a lot of retail companies. There's then the hospital and, you know, organisations like that that feature, and not many big businesses. And that's been something that we're having quite a lot of discussion around, how we attract bigger businesses into Shropshire. And that plays into a lot of the other discussions we've had around land supply and all of that. So I think we have to have an eye on it. And I think, you know, I've said to Matt, we really need to be talking to those businesses and understanding what their needs are. And that will certainly work with some of the issues around, you know, as I said, Brexit. I think the report we'll get from the University of Chester will be helpful as well. So all these things sort of dovetail into giving us a clearer picture about what's happening post-COVID pandemic.
Is there anything particularly, Dan, that you would want the committee to look at besides the overall general overarching theme that we discussed?
I mean, I think it's, you know, it's the pool of sort of trained labour, you know, people, the training that we have in and around this area to fulfil that need, because these are massive businesses that are really important to our local, certainly agri economy. And I come from that background. It's really, it's quite important to me. But there's so many farmers in Shropshire that supply these areas, and if you haven't got enough processing capacity to move them, that shoves the problem further back down the chain. So it's around training. It's about labour pool, and it's about how we have the right amount of properly trained people to satisfy that need, because it just isn't there in the food industry at the moment. You know,
it would be interesting to know how many unemployed there are in the county, compared to pre-pandemic. And match those figures up and see, you know, where these people have gone and why they've gone. We'll move on to you now, eventually, Rob. Thank you.
That's okay. Tracy, I want to ask you about footfall. You referenced it in your report, and when you presented it, that how places like Shrewsbury have held up on footfall. I think in some cases it's been above pre-pandemic levels, whereas comparative towns, I think I saw figures where it was down by 20%. Clearly, but it appears to be the largest difference now to 2019 is the pedestrianisation trial that took place, and obviously that's ended early. I wanted to have your thoughts on is that the thing that's been driving the footfall? Is there something else that's been driving it? And anecdotally, I picked up that the number of businesses either opening or reopening in our towns have been led by that improved visitor experience that came about as a part of those trials.
If you'd like to respond, Tracy.
Yeah, there's a few things there, I think, and you know, it's I don't think it's only one thing. You're absolutely right that, I mean, the footfall levels are really good. There is something about the council making the decision, stepping into by shopping centres pre-COVID pandemic, and that opportunity of condensing everything into the Darwin Centre that is now 97% full and really thriving, and looking at the opportunities with the other sites. And I do wonder whether if that hadn't happened, you know, we would have had 3 shopping centres, very diluted, and would that have brought the vitality we're seeing in our town centre now? But you know, that's sort of a question really for us all. So I think it's, you know, the council does need to, you know, facilitate and support our town centres. The opening and reopening of businesses, I think, you know, with the social distancing measures that have been put in place, the pedestrianisation, I mean, there's a sense by the businesses and the beard that I have regular discussions with that really worked for them, and it gave people opportunities of thinking differently, even expanding their businesses. And there are new businesses coming into the towns all the time, and it's not just Shrewsbury either. Some of our other towns are smaller towns as well. There's a sense that people want to stay local more, and it's just how can we enhance those offers as well and support those businesses. And there's all sorts of, you know, sort of green agenda things that we're trying to do in our towns as well, you know, to encourage people to shop locally. Maybe it's the change of some of those businesses as well, as businesses have reinvented themselves through COVID pandemic as well. And then it's about the visitor experience as well. You know, it's the dwell time. We're really looking at ways and opportunities of encouraging people to come into our towns and to stay in our towns longer, and look at those sort of linked trips as well. So, you know, places to visit. You know, for example, we're looking at, you know, Heritage Trail possibly in Shrewsbury, and working with the Civic Society. Is that something that, you know, would attract more people to come in and find, you know, how delightful Shrewsbury is and the history of Shrewsbury? So there's lots and lots of different things, different strands going on that sort of bring it all together, that has, I think, made our towns feel busy. People want to then come and live in those areas, don't they? They can live and work in those areas. They can walk down the road to their nearest town and shop. And I think that's helped to support our businesses in Shropshire significantly. Thank you.
Kate.
Thanks. In Appendix 3, you mentioned furlough staff. Obviously, we're in a period where we're nearly at the end of furlough now, and it was mentioned, but I was interested to know, is there anything kind of specific that that is being done to look at perhaps getting some of those staff into employment, particularly if there are industries that are short-staffed at the moment and needing people?
Yes, I mean the ARG scheme that we've got, the £2.7 million, is all about that, is to help people reskill and retrain. You know, our colleagues in the Growth Hub, the BID, you know, there's lots of opportunities through organisations that are, you know, we have to push the money out to businesses to do this work. The government criteria is that it can't be the council benefiting from it in terms of delivery, but we are, you know, supporting businesses to be able to look at opportunities of retraining and reskilling people. So we've got quite a lot of programmes, and some of those are listed in the report, Appendix A, I think it is, you know, as to how we can support people. So, you know, we're absolutely on it. And when we look at our unemployment levels compared to the, you know, other parts of the regions, we're doing really, really well. Of course, we still have a number of people that are a significant number of people unemployed, but it's also understanding why they're unemployed as well. And I know we talked earlier about some of the Brexit issues as well for businesses, but you know, how can we, as I say, reskill and retrain people? We've got a lot of opportunities. So if you do hear of anybody that's sort of struggling, then they just need to be directed to us, and we can absolutely show them lots of opportunities and schemes that we have running.
Thank you. Is that okay? Okay. A couple of questions. Would the committee like me to request that it has an opportunity to consider and contribute to the draft economic growth strategy before it's agreed by Cabinet or Council? Would you like to come back? Yes, Julian.
Chair, I was actually going to propose an additional recommendation around
that. Go for it.
So it just seems to me, you know, there's so much talk of building back better and not going back to business as usual, and we've got, you know, there's so many challenges. It feels to me like this is a big piece of work that members need to be involved in, and perhaps we need an away day or an extended opportunity for councillors to consider the different options. You know, there is the whole community wealth building agenda, which some councils follow very, very rigorously. You know, and that is a different model to the sort of inward investment, build it and they will come model. You know, and I think that requires a bit of an examination and perhaps some viewpoints from outside the council. So I would propose that we actually ask for an opportunity for councillors to consider, you know, what direction the economy needs to take.
Are you on the full council or committee?
Open to all members, not necessarily a full council meeting, but you know.
I mean open to everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will second that proposal. Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, unanimous. Yes, so if we can do that, Daniel, that'd be very good. Are there any other questions? Yes. Yes, Peggy.
You talked about perhaps house prices going up, but what developments does Cornoby have what developments does Cornoby have going forward, and how many properties will it complete each year for the next 5 years to help this?
Right, Casey.
So the Cornoby has a programme and it's looking at delivering about 1,000 houses over a 4-year period. And obviously it's schemes to try and bring more affordable housing forward. In terms of our trajectory on affordable housing and all the work we've been doing through the local plan, our affordable housing levels are being delivered. You know, our requirements are being delivered, but of course there's always the opportunity of doing more, and that additionality, which is, you know, what Cornovi was set up to do, is to provide more affordable homes. So there are a number of schemes, and some of those have already got planning permission. I think there's been one on the ground. So we're really starting to see some of the benefits of that, you know, wholly owned company as part of the council. So I think it feels like it's working, and we'll hopefully, as I say, the programme is 1,000 homes over the next 4 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Paul.
Councillor Paul Gill. It's more of a statement than a question. I represent a rural community, and I know that we've talked about trying to attract new business into the county. We have a lot of very successful existing small rural businesses who are trying to come out of the pandemic, are still struggling, and now being faced with further issues, with a lack of logistics, supplies, certain careers, meaning that the likes of the hospitality industry and certain entertainment industries are having to work on restricted hours, and those businesses are nowhere near back to the sort of levels that they need to be in, which leaves them concerned about their finances, their cash flow, and the people that they employ. I think the council and the way that we deal with small existing local businesses is absolutely vital, and I feel that the flexibility that we can offer them in recognising that those businesses haven't returned yet is really important. And it just dismays me slightly when I speak to, you know, I'm the new councillor and I'm going around small businesses and I'm hearing about problems, whether it be with trying to get things through for planning, where they're trying to invest in their business to try and move it forward, or a business today that has spent £140,000 trying to deal with enforcement, which is, you know, threatening the closure of the business and already on restricted hours trying to deal with it. I feel that how we as a council deal with those sort of issues in a more flexible way will really depend on whether some of these businesses make it or not. So it's more of a statement, but thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay. Have you finished with their questions? I think there's no more. Is there any statistics that you feel need to come back to the committee, or do you think we'll cover it in you know, by looking at it in the full? If you're happy with that. Okay. So if everyone's happy, I think we follow the recommendations. Okay, we've noted it, and I assume we all endorse the report. Yeah, everybody happy with that? Great. In that case, we will now move on to item 7, Roadwork Diversions Working Groups Terms of Reference. You'll all have them in front of you on your computer. We've had very little feedback, I believe, Daniel, haven't we, on this one?
That's right, Chair. I mean, the terms of reference are fairly straightforward anyway and reflect the conversation that we had at the previous meeting, so I wasn't really expecting much back anyway.
No, so do you want to speak on it?
The terms of reference encapsulate a concern that was raised at the previous meeting around around various problems allied with the sudden increase in diversions that were happening to support roadworks and streetworks. Officers came and gave an overview of the challenges they're facing, particularly with regards to a very concentrated burst of work to deliver funding that was delivered in year from the Department for Transport, and the plans that are afoot within the local authority to use future capital receipts and capital funding to be able to provide a plan for a steadier stream of work to try and alleviate some of these issues. Nonetheless, the committee identified some lines of inquiry that it wanted to pursue in more detail, particularly around local working with towns and parish councils and communicating through members of the public, and so it agreed to set up a working group that would look at this fairly quickly and report back to the committee. So this is the terms of reference that we've drafted for that. If the committee are minded to go ahead with this, then I will need some nominations from within the group to carry that work going forward. We'll make a start on the preparatory work for that, and I think the intention would be, I think it has to report back in October, but I think a more realistic time will probably be November, given the demands for the meeting in October already in place.
Okay, is everybody happy with those terms of reference and happy to move forward with it? Yeah? Yeah. And would anybody like to put themselves forward for that particular task and finish group. Andy, are you still there online? Andy Boddington?
I am, but I'm having some bandwidth problems, but I can hear you.
I think you've got a particular interest in this one. Would you want to be on that committee?
I have no objection to be on the committee.
Okay. I feel like I pushed you into that one.
Yep.
If anyone is interested in that, I will chair it, obviously. Have you got any interest in that? Peggy, you've had issues, haven't you, with road diversions? Would you like to be on it? Yeah, Peggy Muller. Anybody had issues, problems with diversions? I can see some people putting their head down here. I'm not mentioning your name, Dan. Is anybody? No? Nobody else is interested? Jeff? Thank you, Jeff. Jeff Elmer. And I know. I think what we might do, we don't need a lot of people really,
No,
do we?
it's fine.
Yeah, I don't think we need political balance. I think we're all coming from the same hymn sheet on this, aren't we?
Yeah, we don't know.
Okay, so on that note, thank you very much for that one. I think we can actually move on to item 8, Place Overview Committee Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, you have a copy of that in front of you. Just a couple of changes since I produced this. First of all, the agreement just now that we will set up this working group and report back in November. Since I drafted this as well, the Assistant Director for Infrastructure has come back and asked if we can defer the Highways Capital Programme update to December when they'll have more understanding. They'll have more to present you really at that stage. And then finally, obviously, you just agreed to carry out a piece of work looking in more depth at sector support within the economic growth strategy. So I'll put something in for later in the year, probably around November, to support that as well, if the committee agrees to that.
Yeah, is everybody happy with that? No, everything, no? Okay, that's super. Thank you, Daniel. What would anybody like adding to the programme? Has anybody got any thoughts on it? Yes, Rob.
I wonder whether it would be worth the committee considering the ongoing work that's going on to bring either 20 miles an hour limits outside schools or time limited street closures known as school streets, which I think the council has passed both of those I think a year or even 2 years ago. It seems to be something that's rumbling on. We still have one temporary school street outside Colham Primary. Yeah. And whether that's being made more permanent, or where that programme has really got to, and seems to be dragging a little.
Are you? Do you want to speak on that?
Yes.
Yeah. Please
So,
do,
yeah, I'd like to support Rob on that because we're supposed to have been round and looked and surveyed all of the schools during the summer, and that was done, and it's gone pretty quiet, to be honest with you, on both of those. So I'll back up Rob on that.
Okay, I think one of the issues is obviously officer time because they are run ragged, as we know. I think, would everybody be happy to put that on the work programme? So no invoices, everyone's happy. In that case, we'll add that to the programme. You wanted to say something earlier, I think. Were you talking about shopping centres?
Yes, I was wondering if this committee is the right committee to actually look at where we do relocate to New Shire Hall. I gather from reading the papers that the shopping centre project has been pulled, and there are lots of criteria that we need to develop to find out the right place at the right cost. And I just think this committee should participate in that because this is hugely significant to all of us.
Dan,
Well, I just think that there's a confidential thing coming to council.
That's true. Yeah.
So, and I understand there are sort of commercial sensitivities around it. So, for now, that's certainly something to consider. But my view would be we need to wait and see what's said at council.
Well, perhaps we should do that, and then we can see where we are after that. And if it needs looking at and scrutinising, then we will do so as a committee. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jeff. On that note, we can now.
Chair Andy Boddington. Apologies. I'm not sure you can see me and therefore see.
See.
Thank you. We've discussed this before of getting a specific item on biodiversity. on the agenda as part of our climate change agenda. And I sent a brief for that to Daniel, gosh, back in March, I should think, at a guess. I would plead that we actually look at this issue because it's part of our climate change action. And we need to look at it, not necessarily next month, but sometime in the new year.
Yes, I thought it was on the programme, Daniel, but I can't see it.
No, I'll add that.
No, we'll definitely add that on, and we will try and look at that. If we can look early on in the new, that'd be great. Yes, Julian.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, and thanks for reminding us of that, Andy. I wonder if we can round that up to include, this may be a bit much, but to include sort of, resilience and adaptation, which is a different story to decarbonisation, but it is increasingly an important one. Protecting communities and protecting the biodiversity are part of a similar story, and they're a different story to decarbonisation.
I think that's rather a very large, wide issue. I think we can, if we go for biodiversity, I think we use that as one subject, and we can come back to the other issues.
We definitely will need to come back to the whole business of adaptation.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we'll put biodiversity on. Thank you for that, Andy. And I'm assuming everybody's happy with that. We're a happy bunch, aren't we? Thank you. And with that, I think we actually come to item 9, which is date and time of next meeting. The good news is it's a Monday next time, because Fridays aren't ideal, I know. So Monday, the 25th of October, 2021 at 2 o'clock. But I don't know about committee members. Is everybody happy with afternoon meetings, or would you prefer mornings? Has anybody got a preference? Nobody's got a preference?
Mornings for me, but I don't mind.
Okay, well, nobody seems to mind, so we'll leave it as it is, rather than mess everything up. Okay, if I can say thank you very much to all of you, particularly the substitutes who come in the very last minute. It's been a very interesting meeting. Tracy, thank you very much for your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
I think this is the quietest committee ever. I think it's because it's a Friday and everyone's tired.